It's obvious from what we've seen so far that the Romans place an emphasis on the head of the individual, and that seems to be enough for them to sum up the entire personality. Consequently, the Romans often take heads and place them on bodies that do not, from our perspective today, look like they belong together, creating images that are a tad strange. That's going to be true for 7-9 in our textbook. This is a portrait of a Roman general, and it does come from a sanctuary which was dedicated to Hercules. So this was probably a dedication piece, a kind of offering to Hercules. This is an individual who has a face that has been crafted using verism. It's a very honest looking Roman face, complete with wrinkles and definitely with old age. In contrast to the face, the body of the figure is youthful and ideal. What the Romans are doing here is blending two traditions together. For the face, it's a very Roman tradition. For the body, they're looking back to the ancient Greeks. When the Greeks made portraits, they were going to include the entire body because through the body, especially the nude form of the human body, the Greeks could convey the heroic ideals about the individual and the perfection, the potential of the individual, especially in terms of the heroic nude, which is why when Romans create carved images, the bodies of the individuals also, even if they're living people, might indeed be depicted as nude figures, although obviously Roman citizens are going to walk around the streets wearing clothes. This particular figure is a figure of a Roman general. We know that because in figure 7-9, the material over here references his breastplate. So we do have an idea of who he is, and that carving in the marble also helps to support the statue at the same time. His body is ideal, and what that ideal form does is reference specifically the ancient Greeks. That also suggests that this individual has an appreciation of high society and culture, because from the Roman viewpoint, the ancient Greeks in their artwork represented high civilization. So the Romans are combining the virtue and hard work of the individual, that's shown in the veristic face, with the notion of understanding high culture in the body, and also with ideas of youthfulness and vigor, of spirit perhaps, that would be associated with the individual. This is another set of views, and I think in these maybe you can get a little bit of a better look at the way in which the face is old and the body is young, combining two different cultural traditions into a single sculpture, but saying something very, very positive about this man. Many layers of Roman society created sculpted images of themselves, and that is going to include freed slaves. Slavery in the Roman world was pretty common. It's suggested, and I think our textbook says this, that over 2 million slaves existed in Italy itself. And Gardner definitely says that there is about one slave for every 3 citizens, which is kind of an astonishing number. If you were very rich, of course, you'd have a whole flock of slaves to serve you and to, when you go out in public, follow you around, so that you basically would be advertising your wealth. In the world of the Romans, it was also possible to free your slaves. Now, most were not freed, but many were. And what we're looking at right here is an example of 2 slaves who did in fact receive their freedom from their owner, who is placed in the center. The central figure then is the person who originally owned the woman on the left, as we're looking at the slide, and that's the figure right here, and the young man who is located on the right. The central figure is shown traditionally with a veristic style, so it falls into the period of the Republic. This comes with an inscription, which helps us to understand most of the relationships between the figures, and it does give us the name of the individual who was freeborn in the center, and it's Publius Gessius. So it is the Gessius family, essentially, and I need to explain the family part. We do believe that the female figure who is shown on the left, as we're looking at this, may indeed have become the wife of her original owner. The young man on the right, as you look at this, is believed to be the son of the two figures. What we think happened here is that the lady began as a slave, and she eventually became the wife of the owner, who then freed her and ultimately freed their son. The dates of this and the inscription indicate that she survived her husband, and she was using the money from his estate to actually pay for this funerary monument. In other words, she was not dead when this was created. My interpretation of the relationship of these figures is a little bit different from what you will find in Gardner, but I'm going with what the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston is saying. They are the folks who actually display this piece of sculpture, and also, if you think about it, it makes a great deal of sense. If you are a female slave and you were owned by a male individual, your owner, sex came with part of the job description. And in certain cases, naturally, an affectionate relationship could develop. I'm not suggesting it always does, but it could develop. And in the Roman world, that would be a possibility, particularly where the owner was at liberty to free his slaves. And in this case, I think an affectionate bond did arise, and the young man was also freed. The image also I want you to see, because it's a big chunk of stone, but it's also a relief carving, and I'm going to call it a high relief carving. This is typical of some monuments for the dead that were produced in ancient Rome. It records the family together, and that's what I'd like to really stress here, because and I think Gardner does say this, because death does not separate you. You always maintain a connection with your ancestors, and in this case, the people who were once slaves also took pride in acquiring their freedom. This is a closer look, and I would like to point out this is the woman and this is the owner in the center, the original owner. I'd just like to point out, I know that this is worn, but I think you can see that he is much more honestly portrayed, I'm going to say more veristically portrayed, than the female is. There's a tendency for females in the ancient Roman world to shun veristic depictions. Perhaps they don't want to deal with the honesty of the portrayal. That takes us to some painted depictions that come from Pompeii. Both of these images depict portraits, and we are going to do another talkie and introduce Pompeii with these images.